Hey there, Space Monkeys. Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. We're going to continue with Dreamland by Sam Quinones today. For the book club, it's page 291. This is chapter 53, part 2. We're going to start towards the top of the page, and I highly recommend you just go out and buy this book. It's absolutely worth reading. It's worth having in your own personal library. I love it. I'm going to give it 5 stars more than likely. We're almost at the end of the book here. Page 291 at the top. One addict I met was Carter, from one of California's wealthiest communities, the son of a banker. Carter had been a high school star in football and baseball. With no break from sports during the year, he battled injuries that never healed. A doctor prescribed Vicodin for him, with no warning on what Vicodin contained or suggestions for how it should be used. Sports were king in Carter's town. It was a place of gleaming mansions, but he felt no sense that education was of value in providing choices in life, much less for the love of learning. These kids' futures were assured, so sports were what mattered. Dads would brag to friends about their sons' athletic exploits, then berate their boys for poor play, urging greater sacrifice. From the athletic director down to the parents and the teachers, they heard, "You need grades so you can play." That was the vibe we got, Carter told me. I saw this often. Many new athlete addicts were not from poor towns where sports might be a ticket out for a lucky few. The places where opiate addiction settled hard were often middle and upper class and upper middle class. Parents were surgeons and developers and lawyers and provided their kids with everything. Yet sports were as much a narcotic for these communities as they were to any ghetto. Love of learning seemed absent, while their school weight rooms were palatial things, and in many of them pain pills were quietly commonplace. Just as opiates provided doctors with a solution to chronic pain patients, Vicodin and Percocet provided coaches with the ultimate tool to get kids playing again. Like, you ever seen the movie Varsity Blues with the football team, the high school football team, where they're just like injecting drugs in all these injured players so that they can keep playing? They're kids, but it rests hard in them because of this mentality, because of this culture. Carter's coach told him stories of players years before gulping down Vicodin before practices and games. In my town, the stands were always filled. You wanted to be the hero, so you think, I can't look weak, I gotta push myself. I would get these small injuries, the coaches wouldn't pay any attention. I taught myself not to pay any attention to any injuries. Most athletes on every team Carter played on used pills for injury or recreation. Soon Carter grew addicted to Vicodin and then to OxyContin. From there, as a student athlete at a Division I university, he began using heroin. I was coming to see football players as symbols of this American epidemic. Their elevated status on campus left some of them unaffected by consequences. Carter was caught selling pills and was told not to do it again. Above all, though, players were in constant pain and expected to play with it. If opiates were now for chronic pain, well, football players endured more chronic pain than most. Necks, thighs, and ankles ached all season long. Medicating injuries to get athletes playing through the pain was nothing new. But as oxycodone and hydrocodone became the go-to treatment for chronic pain, organized sports, and football in particular, opened as a virtual gateway to opiate addiction in many schools. Thus, with the epidemic emerged the figure of the heroin-addicted football player, though of course few wanted to talk too much about that. By 2008, when Joanna Crone's son died, these kinds of delusions had been accepted for almost a decade in places like Salt Lake, Albuquerque, Charlotte, Minneapolis, and other cities that had for the same decade been the drivers and beneficiaries of the greatest boom in the history of the U.S. consumer spending. But it was in that beat-down Portsmouth, Ohio, where one mother, and not the wealthiest in town by a long shot, had the gumption to own the truth and say something about it. Across Portsmouth, at the counseling center, Ed Hughes thought silence was a huge part of the story. Opiates had exploded all those plans Hughes had in the mid-90s to consolidate the counseling center's operations and focus on improving its internal workings. The center opened years before in a small house. By 1992, it began residential treatment with 16 beds. When I met Hughes, the counseling center had 150 beds, a huge waiting list, and a staff close to 200, and had just moved its outpatient center into an abandoned 3-story school, due entirely to the swarms of new opiate addicts. "We've never seen anything move this fast," Hughes told me. A decade and a half in, Ed Hughes was still waiting for the arc of addicted clients to plateau and curve downward. Kids were coming to the center from across Ohio. Many, he said, grew up coddled, bored, and unprepared for life's hazards and difficulties. They'd grown up amid the consumerist boom that began in the mid-90s. Parenting was changing then, too, Hughes believed. Spoiled rich kids syndrome seeped into America's middle classes. Parents shielded their kids from complications and hardships and praised them for minor accomplishments, all as they had less time for their kids. "You only develop self-esteem one way, and that's through accomplishment," Hughes said. "You have a lot of kids who have everything and look good, but they don't have any self-esteem. You see 20-somethings, they have a nice car, money in their pocket, and they got a cell phone, a big screen TV. You ask them, where the hell did all that stuff come from? You're a student. My mom and dad gave it to me." And you put opiate addiction in the middle of that? He winced. Then the third leg of the stool is the 15-year-old brain. Hughes saw all this that time too, adult drug users incapable of making mature choices. This happened because opiates stunted the part of their brain controlling rational action. We've got to 25 to 30-year-old opiate-addicted people who are going on 15. Their behavior, the way their brain works, is like an adolescent, he said. It's like the drug came in there and overwhelmed that brain chemistry, and the front of the brain did not develop. The front of the brain has to develop through mistakes, but the first reaction of the addicted person is to head back to the family. "Will you rescue me?" Whatever the person's rescued from, there's no learning. There's no experiences, no frontal brain development. They're doing well, and then some idea comes into their head, and they're off a cliff. It may not be a decision to use. Most relapse comes not from the craving of the drug. It comes from this whole other level of unmanageability, putting myself in compromising situations, or being dishonest, being lazy, basically being a 15-year-old. Hughes knew families as addicted to rescuing their children as their kids were addicted to dope. This too was an epidemic, Hughes believed. "I've got 40-year-olds who act like 22-year-olds because their families are so enmeshed in rescuing them. The parents are giving them a place to live, giving them money, taking care of things, worrying about them, and calling me trying to get them into treatment. I try to tell parents it's real important to say no, but say no way back when they're young." And we'll continue with the rest of the chapter later today or tomorrow. We're on page 294. Hope you're enjoying the book, guys. Keep fighting that good fight.